And speaking of, there is something I now really hope. I hope that Donald Trump will leave the White House with dignity. I hope that he will stop recklessly claiming he's been cheated out of a win. Last night, I said it seemed that Donald Trump was the most likely to win the US election, but overnight that swung right around with counting of the votes mailed in before Election Day. And now it's Joe Biden, the Democrat, is almost certain to become the next president of the United States. It all comes down to the count in 3 states now, Pennsylvania, Georgia and Nevada. If Biden wins any one of them, he'll have enough electoral college votes to win the whole shooting match and is already ahead in the count in 2. No wonder Biden today struck a presidential tone.
My fellow Americans yesterday once again proved that democracy is the heartbeat of this nation, just as it has been the heartbeat of this nation for 2 centuries. And even in the face of a pandemic, more Americans voted this election than ever before in American history. Over 150 million people cast their votes. I think that's just extraordinary. And if we had any doubts, we shouldn't have any longer about a government of, by, and for the people. It's very much alive in America.
But Donald Trump last night shook faith in that democracy with an explosive claim, with no proof that I could see. He said he'd won, but the Democrats were going to cheat him out of it.
Frankly, we did win this election. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
Now, today, Trump stayed away from the cameras, but son Eric was sent out to Pennsylvania to step up the claims that Democrats were stealing the election. The Republicans would fight this in the courts.
Guys, this is fraud. This is absolute fraud. We've seen it in Philadelphia before. They're trying to make a mockery of the election of this country.
Now, as I say, this is an explosive claim, particularly when Trump supporters have just seen the vote go from favouring Donald Trump to suddenly favouring Biden. And social media's gone nuts with conspiracy theories. And Trump supporters have protested at polling stations in Arizona and in Detroit to demand the vote count stop. Now, it's not enough for people of the right to defend all this by saying, you know, hey, why can't we protest? Why can't we share conspiracy theories? The left's been doing that for the last 4 years of Donald Trump. The left rioted. The left said Trump stole the election with the Russians' help. And, of course, the left tried even to impeach Donald Trump, sack him. But Americans and Australians just all got to back off this hyper-partisanship. But there's only one thing that counts, that your side wins. In this instance, democracy must win, faith in democracy. And democracy is not just a system where people choose their own leaders. It's also a system where leaders agree to leave peacefully when their time is up, because no graceful losers means blood in the street. Now, there are going to be Trump supporters, you can almost hear you through the TV screen, saying, but there was fraud. There was fraud. Even Australia's former ambassador to Washington, Joe Hockey, today said on radio, of course there was cheating.
It is a complete dog's breakfast right across, not just in Pennsylvania, but right across the country. I mean, there are 10,000 different organisations that are responsible for setting the rules for the US presidential election. 10,000. It's a mess.
So there's a chance that electoral fraud has happened?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there will be. But the question is whether it's enough to change the election outcome.
And I don't doubt there was some cheating by Biden supporters, but was it really that much, that big, to make the difference between Trump winning and losing? Now, any cheating should be investigated, should be stopped. But let me tell you why I think the Trump team has nothing big so far to explain losing. Here is Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, also in Pennsylvania with Eric Trump, making Donald Trump's best case.
Well, we were supposed to be allowed by law to observe the counting of the ballots. Now, observe means, to any intelligent person, being able to look at it. The way it's interpreted by the Democrat crooked machine of Philadelphia is that the observers can be 20 or 30 feet away, never able to see the ballot itself, never able to see if it was properly postmarked, properly addressed, properly signed on the outside. All the things that often lead to disqualification of ballots or make it very easy to dump 50,000 totally fraudulent ballots because they're not observed. Not a single Republican has been able to look at any one of these mail ballots. They could be from Mars, as far as we're concerned, or they could be from the Democratic National Committee.
Now, I think that certainly is a problem, particularly with a record number of mail-in ballots this election. Republican election observers not being allowed to come close and see the ballots they're supposed to be checking. And it's particularly a problem when Democrat officials change those rules so that mail-in ballots didn't even have to have a signature of the voter that matched the signature on the voter registration. I challenge that too. And let's not get too upset, be hypocrites about this. Democrats had no problem themselves challenging this kind of stuff when they lost. I mean, you remember 20 years ago when Al Gore lost to George Bush, the Democrats took that to the courts to challenge the voting machines in Florida. But to repeat, where is the evidence that fraud this year was the difference between Trump winning and losing and then having to leave gracefully? Here is Rudy Giuliani's perfect example, the one today, talking about the vote in Pennsylvania.
But this isn't happening just here. We have exactly the same lawsuit in Wisconsin, where exactly the same thing happened. Except in Wisconsin, mysteriously at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, about 120,000 ballots appeared. Oh, here come these ballots. Well, we have no idea if they really are ballots. We have no idea if they're signed, if they're postmarked properly, if it isn't just the same person who submitted 100,000 ballots, and they all got counted. This is the way they intend to win.
See, that's where I start losing faith in Trump's case, because that example, those 120,000 votes mysteriously appearing around 3 a.m. in the morning to push Biden ahead of Trump in the count, is one of those conspiracy theories that did go viral, in fact, with this graphic being texted around, tweeted around. It's legitimate. It shows, yes, a huge spike in Biden's votes that I've illustrated with that arrow. That spike in the blue line, you see Biden tracking below the red line of Trump, and suddenly, whoops, there is ahead. But do you know what that dump of votes actually was? That was the count of the vote in Milwaukee, a stronghold for the Democrats. I mean, it's such a strong Democrat stronghold. It voted nearly 80% last time for Hillary Clinton, and all the votes were counted at once in one place and boom, added to the total, and that explains that. No conspiracy. Another claim I've seen texts around, including by former politicians here. More people voted in parts of Milwaukee than have been registered to vote. That seems to be because you can actually register as you vote. And we're talking, at least in these areas. And we're talking here about probably fewer than 1,000 extra votes. Not enough to swing an election. Another claim, 1,400 votes. Sorry, 140,000 votes did appear from nowhere. In Michigan, suddenly, 140,000 extra votes. And Trump jumped on that one too, with little tweet. But again, that was just a typo. One booth added a zero, an extra zero, to the votes that counted, and it was quickly fixed. Quickly fixed. No conspiracy. So I can't see the evidence of fraud here, enough to change the election result. And the reason I've gone through this in a bit of detail is because this is going to take off. The Democrats stole the election, and I would love the president to cool that rhetoric until there is actually real evidence. But do you know what I think is really happening here? It's that Trump's vanity is so great and so fragile that he's desperate for an excuse for losing, and to Biden. He needs his supporters to think he was robbed, not beaten. And that's also because he wants them to feel a rage that will motivate them to get behind any political plans he has or any media empire he's planning to build. A Trump media over the next 4 years. Now that's, all right, that's good for Donald Trump, but it's not good for democracy.